Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Mind Explorations. My guest today is Tim Box, a non-state hypnotherapist. Sorry, I'm laughing. We were just discussing the state and non-state theory of hypnosis because last time I had on Frederick Mao. If you haven't seen the episode, go and find it on my channel or in the replays in the Facebook group. Anyway, let's get back to serious business. Here's Tim Box. Tim Box is a clinical hypnotherapist and has been for 15 years full time. And he specializes in anxiety. He has a TED talk that's been on anxiety, of course, that's been viewed millions of times. So I would say Tim is kind of an expert on anxiety. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, Astrid. Thank you for that lovely warm intro.
You're welcome. And I think I just, is there anything you would like to add to introduce yourself? Because
to my introduction.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Except just to make it clear, the non-state thing was a joke. But that I'm happy with that. Otherwise, yeah.
No, Tim's open to everything. Good.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
So
no, the only thing I was going to add was that I work. I'm probably best known in hypnotherapeutic circles for working in a non-trance state, not state. You've got me talking that way
so
now.
Confusing you.
See, yeah, that's what happens when you have this long chat before we go on. In a non-trance methodology, and using something that I call the control system. So that's the only thing I would add to my CV there.
Oh, good. Okay, yes, please. Your elementary school? No. Oh, good. So, what made you work or get into anxiety as a specialty?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I think initially it was because anxiety started to become the thing that I was just seeing loads of people for. I think a lot of the people in our profession would probably say that anxiety is, it used to be referred to as the modern epidemic in mental health circles before, the actual pandemic that occurred, and I was seeing a lot of people for that. And I recognized that after a while, I was hearing a very similar story from them as they came to see me in terms of what they've tried in terms of CBT and counseling and stuff like that. And they were given a very different model of what it was to the way I saw it, which is, in some way framed by my own experience with social anxiety when I was younger. But that wasn't necessarily really why I got into working with anxiety. But because of working with a lot of people for anxiety and recognizing that the way that I was working with it differed, or the way I was approaching it differed from the way they had experienced before, I then I was offered the opportunity to write a book. From my mentor was starting a publishing company, and he wanted to bring in the people that he thought had some good ideas to publish the first set of books in his publishing company. And I said, hey, I'd like to do something on anxiety. He said, anxiety's been done a million times, it's boring. Then I explained to him what I wanted to talk about. He was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. And so that was there. And then from doing the book, I realized there was probably a good TED talk in it, because I always wanted to give a TED talk, but I never really knew what I was going to talk about. And then I worked out what I wanted to talk about. So I did the TED talk. Then that went live online at about somewhere early 2020. And for some reason around that time, everyone started to get really anxious about something. So it turned out that kind of went viral. And as a result, every person I see since then has been an anxiety client, because everybody I see comes to me via that TED talk and via my YouTube channel, which I now is primarily about anxiety. So it's kind of like, it's like anything. I think when you niche in a certain subject, in a certain topic or an issue, you don't just say, right, that's going to be my issue. You kind of work your way into it, and fate takes you there a little bit. Yeah, but it's interesting because it was also probably, emotionally speaking, the one that I'm more closely tied to because of my own experience when I was younger as well.
Right. So you could empathize with people.
Which maybe that played a part in it. Do you know what I mean?
So, okay, first of all, which story do people tell you? What have they been taught? What have they been through? And how do they experience anxiety? Or maybe we'll split that into two questions or two parts, if you like.
Yeah, I think the story they've been told is that they are kind of afflicted with a disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're offered medication or CBT, and they go for CBT. And then largely, I mean, I don't want to diss CBT practitioners because, you know, they do good work, but
Mm-hmm.
the model there is, yeah, you have an anxiety disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, anyone that works with anxiety for more than 5 minutes will notice the thing the person is most anxious about is their disorder. They're
Mm-hmm.
most anxious about their anxiety.
Yeah.
And it seemed astonishing to me that when I said, you know, and they were saying, I don't know what I'm anxious about. It strikes out of nowhere. When I said, well, you're anxious about whether you feel anxious or not, aren't you? And that was a completely new concept to them. And they were like, "Oh my God, I never thought of it that way."
Yeah.
And that you've had all these therapies running up to seeing me, and nobody had ever just made that point to you. That really the work here was to stop you being so concerned with whether or not you feel anxious. So the idea that anxiety is not a disorder or an illness, it's an emotion, was
Mm-hmm.
completely new to them. And that's, I guess, what just stood out like a sore thumb to me. It was only later on that a client actually said, "Oh, so you must be like a bit of a disciple of Claire Weekes then." And I was like, "Who's Claire Weekes then? I've not read any, you know." And obviously she introduced the idea of second fear of fear, anxiety about anxiety.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I was a bit miffed that I wasn't the person who came up with it, but you know, at least I was in good company, put it that way. And that was the thing. And so the people that come to see me, they see me because when they listen to my TED talk, and there's the moment in the TED talk where I say anxiety isn't an illness, it's an emotion. They all go, "Why has nobody told me that yet?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Why have I been medicated for an emotion?
Mm-hmm.
Why have I been told I have something wrong with me for feeling an emotion?
Yeah.
And that's the burden that we seek to lift when we work with anxiety, is this idea that you're carrying some affliction that means you're malfunctioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So how do they experience it? So they're anxious about having an anxiety attack or having anxiety. But what else is inside the mind of anxious people?
Inside the mind of anxious. Okay, so what they experience mainly, if you were to say, if I could click my fingers and some aspect of this would just vanish, normally they'll tell you the physical sensations. Actually, they won't tell you the physical sensations. They'll say the symptoms. Yeah. And of course, symptoms implies illness. Yeah, we have symptoms of an illness. So they're still calling them symptoms, when I would encourage them to say, well, let's talk about the sensations then. So they might have heart palpitations. They might experience excessive muscle tension or headaches, or, you know, that globus hystericus, the lump in the throat thing going on. They might have stomach issues, or, you know, and Christ, 101 other different sensations physically that they're experiencing. And they've made this mistake of conflating the two. Anxiety is the sensation is my anxiety. Yeah, when actually it's your body responding physically to your fear of feeling anxious. Yeah. And this is the thing that most people get wrong, is when they're referring to the sensations, they're talking about the very natural, healthy fight or flight response.
Right.
Yeah, when we feel threatened, we go into fight or flight. So our body does the thing, you know, all the many different things that come with a boost of adrenaline and cortisol. Yeah.
Right.
So, for some reason, maybe a very understandable reason, they're not so alarmed by the idea that, oh, so I'm just having a fear response, which I know I can relate to that, because that time when somebody jumped out from the corridor and scared me, you know, my heart went through the roof and beat it out my chest and was doing, you know, 120 BPM suddenly, you know. They can relate to that. The one thing they can't relate to is that their anxiety causes their heart rate to increase and their breathing to get shallower and faster. Yeah, when you explain to them, no, that's not anxiety, that's fear. Yeah. And that's why I have a particular dislike. I say a dislike like I've got some vendetta or something, but when people are explaining anxiety as a different type of fear. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen like the Inside Out 2, the Pixar film.
Yeah.
Where the character anxiety introduces herself as like fear, but I'm a different type of fear. I'm fear about things in the future. Okay, look, don't get me wrong. I like Pixar films and I really like that film, but anxiety is anxiety. Fear is fear. Yeah. That there's a distinction there. Yeah. Anxiety isn't a type of fear. Anxiety is the emotion that says, pay attention to this important thing. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it is threatening. And that's when fear comes to the party, or it's perceived to be threatening. But other times it's just mundane stuff that, that's the next thing I've got to do. Yeah. The thing that nudges you in the side of the head and says, remember to do that thing,
Okay, so anxiety is not fear of the future. Because we say that depression is worrying about the past, anxiety is worrying about the future. What do you say about that one?
Okay, so bring on to depression then.
Sorry.
Depression, I would suggest, is an absence of motion towards, right? So I'm going to have to use an analogy to explain this, because I think that's the best way of doing it. I have a very simple analogy about explaining how the mind works. I think of the mind like a ship, and every ship has a captain and a crew. If we think of the captain as our logical conscious bit of our thinking, and the crew as our subconscious, it's the crew that have their hands on all the things that steer and sail your ship.
Yeah.
So your captain has the idea of where you want to go. The crew are implementing that idea, or sometimes they're not, which is why clients come to see us, because our crew are trying to sail the ship in a direction the captain doesn't agree with. Okay, so basically speaking, the crew sail your ship by triggering emotions. Okay, so if there's danger, fear. You feel that discomfort that encourages you to sail the ship away from the perceived danger. And that returns you to comfort when you're far enough away from the perceived danger that we don't need to sail the ship any further away. If you've been wronged, your crew might trigger anger, and that will inspire you to take some action to right the wrong that's been done to you. Anxiety is just, hey, captain, pay attention to this. It's the most important thing right now. So it could be in the moment, or it could be a long-term thing that's just sitting there undealt with, as so to speak. But ultimately your crew are trying to sail the ship towards happiness. Okay. Happiness being, okay, I don't need to course correct right now. I am sailing in the right direction. Depression, for me, the way I think of this and the way I work with depression, if I do work with depression with clients, is that this is the thing where your crew no longer perceive the possibility of future happiness. There is no light out there to sail towards. And this is why people who are genuinely depressed don't describe it as sadness. They describe it as numbness, no emotion. And that's because the crew have stopped trying to sail the ship in any direction, because there is nowhere to sail to. So they're not triggering any emotions anymore. That's why depression can be, if you keep it simple, a simple issue to work with, because all you've got to do is understand why the crew don't think there's happiness out there at the moment, and work out how you get them to realize that there is. That kind of thing. So, and this is the very simple model that I work on when I'm working with the same way I train my practitioners to work, is let's see, what do your crew need to know so they can start triggering the emotions to sail the ship in the right direction. If that makes sense, So
it does.
So that's what I think I would how I would answer that question in terms of anxiety being worrying about the future, depression worrying about the past. I think that in some way misrepresents what's going on, but then only according to the model that I'm using, probably not according to whatever other model you're using. And to bring it back onto anxiety, I think I get success with anxiety because we differentiate between, we recognize it's simply the emotion your crew use to get the captain's attention to whatever is deemed to be important. So I'm mentioning the TED talk, every Friday morning I wake up feeling anxious because it's bin day. I've got to take the bins out. A bit of me says, oh God, the bins. And it's anxiety that nudges me in the side of the head, oh, take the bins out. Now, it's not crippling. It's not like, oh my God. But if I was of the opinion that I had an anxiety disorder, any sort of, oh, my heart suddenly skipped a beat there, I've got to go and take the bins out quickly before the bin men arrive. I might be like, oh my God, look, I've woken up with anxiety. I'm going to have an anxious day. And then we add that second fear. Now I'm really anxious about how anxious I've just kickstarted all my cortisol levels, all my anxiety. I've kickstarted it. I'm going to have a crap day now because everything is going to make me feel really, really anxious. And the thing you're really anxious about is the potential to feel anxious today.
Hmm.
and experience all those sensations you don't like,
So that sounds quite simple, and maybe it is. But why do so many practitioners feel anxious about working with anxiety clients? Because that's the title of our podcast today. Why do they feel anxious? What's the worry? And by the way, whoever is online here at the moment live, if you want to ask questions, put them into the chat. And if you're on YouTube or on Facebook, put them into the comments, please. And let us know if you like the whole podcast as well, and smash the like button. All that. Now, Tim Box, back to
Nicely
you.
done. I think people feel anxious about working with anxiety because it gets built up into like the big thing. And a lot of people will, we talk about anxiety disorders and all the different types and flavors and shapes and colors of anxiety disorder that we might experience. And I think that's the danger, is that we suddenly say, the big book of mental health, I always forget what the title, you'll be able to tell me what
DSM-5.
Thank you very much. No matter how many times people tell me that, I will never remember the title of that. And I've decided that, apparently, my mind has. Anyway, point being, is that you got all these different, and the number of disorders grows, doesn't it, every time they update the book. And that's why I think we get a little bit anxious about working with anxiety, because we're like, well, am I educated enough? Do I know enough about all of the latest conditions and all the latest issues that could surround all of this? But I think you could argue everything is anxiety. Everything we're dealing with comes with some degree of anxiety. No matter what we're working on, inevitably the client is feeling anxious about this thing we're working on, whether it's depression, anxiety, pain, weight loss, stop smoke, whatever the hell it is we're working on, they come with anxiety about that. So it's like, we're always working with it. So maybe we don't need to categorize it in multiple different ways and just say, well, let's just work with that idea that a member of your crew, a bit of your mind, is saying, I think this is the most important issue for us to address right now. And if we work with that, then probably we can just deal with things as they come to us. I was always taught, work with the person, not the problem. Work with the condition, not the client. The client, not the condition. Sorry, because it's like, I think that's what we should do. Because we've got, my original mentor said to me, it's a pattern of thought. Everything, no matter what we're talking, it's a pattern of thought. You got to work out how you get them from the pattern they're running at the moment to the pattern they want to be running. That's it. That's the whole game. Yeah. No matter what technique you're using, no matter what therapy you're doing, we were talking before about CBT practitioners, and working with the conscious process more than the subconscious process. So if you want to put it that way, but they're still trying to ultimately reprogram the subconscious so that your automatic responses change. That's what we're doing. Pattern of thought that I have to pattern of thought that I want. That's all we're doing. So I think if we could sort of destigmatize what goes on with anxiety, then we could make things a lot simpler. And certainly that everything, you said that sounds simple. Good, because it's meant to. Keep it simple is the mantra here. The reason your client is having a problem is because they're locked in their complexities right now. They're tied up in knots with every little bit of minutiae that they're going through. Our job as therapists is not to join them there. It's not to try and unpick every little aspect of this. It's to say, what would be your best strategy for your happiness right now? How do we get you to that? And how do we get your mind to adopt that, even in the face of everything that you've experienced so far?
But sorry, go ahead.
Go on, sorry.
Okay, if we didn't have the DSM-5 and it wasn't an anxiety disorder, would we have less anxiety in the world?
Okay, so I'm probably gonna say okay, because I know how many people have been screwed up by their diagnosis. I know how many people have got more anxious when they left the therapist's office or even the doctor's office, because that person said, okay, you have an anxiety disorder. So you go to a number of people I've seen, they go to the doctor with all of their symptoms, and the doctor runs a load of tests. And of course, anxiety is a diagnosis of elimination. You simply rule out all of the medical things that could be wrong, that could be causing all of these symptoms. And so they all come back negative. And the doctor says, so I think this is anxiety. This is just anxiety. And then you walk away from there and you think, oh, I've tested positive for anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you've tested negative for everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is good news. It means all that's happened is you've been getting overly concerned about some aspect of your existence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all you've got to do is work on that, understand that aspect of existence a little bit better to the point where it doesn't scare you anymore.
Is this a reframe you have to use with clients to get kind of above or to get through the white coat syndrome? Like as in white coat syndrome, as in because a doctor told me I have a disorder.
Yeah. Well, I think I see a fair amount of people that deal with white coat syndrome because the stuff I put out there is very much, this is not a medical issue. Right. Yeah. So I think we as a profession, we're a little bit victim of people seeing us as part of the medical profession, aren't we? Because that's like, oh yeah, I can't go and do this because that means engaging in some aspect of the thing that I'm most afraid of, which is medical people. So right. I think possibly it helps the client get rid of that idea that in some way I'm going to, I don't know, get stuff done to me. And again, I think this is probably another reason why I work without a formal trance process, because it takes away that fear that people might have of being put under, and having some state induced, I suppose, as we were saying earlier, which might be something that kind of is a little bit of a trigger of their own concerns and fears,
Right. We have some questions. Where does OCD fall within your model?
Okay, so OCD is, I should say as well, I don't recommend people work with OCD, because I'm not a fan of working with the higher level anxiety disorders. Not that we can't work with it and get great results, because, we do, don't we, at the end of the day? Yeah, we recognize this as an emotional strategy that your mind has developed. But we shouldn't, just because we can get a good result, doesn't mean we should always take on a client if it leaves us open for critique. In terms of, hey, you're not medical. What makes you think you're qualified to work with this level of anxiety disorder that is officially classified in your manuals and in your books, and it should be medical people. And I think it's certain states in America, isn't it, where you literally can't work with that unless you've got a doctorate, unless you are a medical doctor. And I kind of, when I'm training practitioners, I'm always, steering them to stay in their lane.
Right.
And not just the lane they feel is their lane, but also the lane that others might perceive as their lane. We don't need to leave our profession open for critique and criticism, or leave ourselves open for it. But it doesn't mean I've never worked with a client that has experienced OCD behaviors, that we would class as that. And, OCD is thrown around so much these days without a formal diagnosis of it. It's just like, oh, well, that's a bit OCD, isn't it? It's like you do anything. God, you arrange your towels in the right order and suddenly you've got OCD. Do you know what I mean? It's like people are very quick to tell you, just the layperson as well, not a practitioner. I mean, just your mates, And so it doesn't mean that we can't work with them, because we know that they're emotional strategies that our mind has developed to try and grab some control when we had no agency, and they, to be fair, I don't want to make sort of sweeping generalizations here and be too reductive about a certain issue, but we see these things all the time. The patterns repeat. So we know we can get great results, and we know that people will get great results. But what I would tend to do when working with OCD, I'll work with pattern I have, pattern I want. But if I feel like the client wants to do deep work into that, I'll teach them how to make changes in their own subconscious patterns.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll let them make that journey, because I have a lot of faith in the person's subconscious, in our crew, if you like. Yeah. Your crew are sailing your ship really, really well. Even if you're struggling with something right now, you've got so many crew members up there that are doing a bang up job. Yeah. And you've just got that one that's struggling. If you can alleviate the burden from that one, hey, you'd be surprised how quickly your crew get back on track and show you just how brilliant they are.
So that's a metaphor you use then, with the crew and the ship as well.
No, there's actual people in your, it's a metaphor.
It's a bit Terry Pratchett tonight, isn't it? No, I mean, that's a metaphor you use in your work. I mean, not just
absolutely. Yeah. I
okay,
do.
wonderful. Okay, another question. My client was a witness of shooting in school where people died. She can't leave home and has all sorts of problems. Can't sleep. It's hard to even find the time to talk with me. Very hard case. She says she can't think straight. I don't know if she will even try hypnotherapy. What's your opinion?
Yeah. Well, first off, we can't help anyone that doesn't reach out for help. That's
Hmm.
obviously a standard,
Yeah.
unfortunate rule,
Yeah.
that we have in that if especially with what we do, any therapy for a start is that way, isn't it? They're not going to achieve any change unless they're up for change and they want to engage in the process of change. But
Mm.
especially with us, where we need the full commitment and buy-in of the subconscious to even get our foot in the door.
Mm.
So there's that to say first. Second thing to say, but let's imagine this person was like, okay, help me out here. I
Yeah.
want to do something. I tend to think, what we're talking about here is past trauma, aren't we? Constant
Hmm.
revisiting of trauma.
Yeah.
So let's use while we're on the subject, let's use the metaphor of the captain of the crew then.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the crew are basically applying what we might say is the broadest strategy here for understanding the thing that could not be understood.
Hmm.
Yeah. When something bad happens, a bit of us gets the job, work out what did we do wrong so that we
Mm.
can not have that bad thing happen again, or what did we just not do right to avoid it.
Yeah.
And when it's something like I witnessed a school shooting,
Mm.
you're not going to see that coming. There's nothing you could
Yeah.
have done. There's nothing you can do in the future because it's one of those completely random things. All your mind said is, the only thing we did wrong there, I think, was leave the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just not do that anymore. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so your mind is applying a strategy that kind of keeps you safe, but unfortunately doesn't sail you towards happiness.
Right.
So if I were working with this client, I'd be like, okay, yeah, it's definitely safer in the house than outside the house.
Hmm.
Yeah. But um, is it a necessary safety protocol in terms
Hmm.
of living our life? Okay. There's a thing that we refer to as the unsolvable puzzle. Yeah. So when that bit of your crew, that member of your crew gets the job, work out what happened. That's why we revisit. That's why we flash back. That's
Hmm.
why we're constantly unable to take our mind away from it because we're
Right.
still trying to solve the puzzle. What do we do? How do we find happiness when this can happen in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a bit like the jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Yeah. You've got that bit of your mind stuck at the table trying to finish this puzzle. You already know there are not all the pieces there. You'll never
Mm.
complete this puzzle. And yet that bit of your mind has been given that job. You can't leave the table until you complete this puzzle.
Mm.
And it's like, well, hang on. Maybe we don't give you that burden. Maybe we're okay to say, look, some things we are not going to complete the puzzle on. Some things are never going to make sense.
Yeah.
But that's okay because we know not everything in life is going to make sense. We're not going to have all the answers, no matter how hard we look all the way through our life. So maybe we can file this one away under, hey, that didn't make sense, but that's okay because some
Mm.
things don't. Yeah. And we encourage our subconscious to say, well, let's work on the puzzles that can be solved, which is the puzzles of today, not the puzzles of yesterday. So we
Hmm.
kind of leave that in the past, as it were. I did this. I originally used this sort of insight with a client of mine that had just come for initial consultation, and she wanted to stop drinking because she found that when she was on her own in the house, her mind went to a dark place, and drinking was the numbing agent to stop that.
Right.
And I asked what that was, and she said, "Well, my son killed himself 10 years ago, and I was the last person to talk to him on the phone that night."
Right.
And he'd expressed his concerns and how bad he was feeling. And we thought we talked him down. He'd already had 2 attempts previously, apparently. I was going to go over there next morning and we were going to, he said, okay,
Mm.
I'll see you in the morning. And that was the last time I spoke to him. And
Right.
she said, and that's where her mind goes to that conversation, which of course it's going to, it
Yeah.
made perfect sense that would be happening. And I explained all of that kind of unsolvable puzzle idea. I said, look,
Mm.
if we choose to work on this together, I think that's what that bit of your mind needs to know. Yeah, is that some puzzles are not going to be solved, but
Mm.
that's okay. Yeah.
Mm.
And it turned, and we did end up going ahead with some work, but it was like a month later that was when we could get the first session. I think I was going away to Australia or something like that. And it was always a month before we get the first session in. And she came back, and bear in mind, we didn't do any work here. We just sat and talked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I offered this idea. And she said to me she said, what did you do in that first session? And I said, we didn't do anything, did we? We just had a chat about things. She said, well, I haven't had a drink since I've seen you.
Oh.
She said, I've not felt the need. She
Mm.
said, I just, when I'm on my own now, I don't even answer the phone. I don't like my peace disturbed, And we just both came to the conclusion, hey, I think that member of your crew realizes doesn't have to do this job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she still obviously was not happy that her son had died, obviously, but she wasn't revisiting it constantly anymore. And she hadn't had a drink as a result of that. So, but this is what I mean. It's like, she was here, this pattern of thought, she wanted this pattern of thought. How do we get there? Yeah. Is there a magic method? Is it depth of hypnosis that's going to make the difference? Is it swish technique? Is it timeline? Well, no, it's whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
So you can be here, you know? And that's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Guy says it's learning to be happy with paradox. Permission?
Well, that's a good way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah. And permission, what do you mean by permission?
Giving I know what Guy means. Yeah, giving the subconscious permission, so you don't have to do that job anymore. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the number of times I feel like all I've done is said, hey, crew member, I see you. I get what you're doing. I understand it. I can relate to it. But here's the good news. You can stop it. Don't have to do it anymore,
ERT is another comment.
I don't know what that means, though.
I don't know either. Two of us smart people, and we don't know what it means. Do you want to explain that? Oh, let's just keep talking in that time. If you want to explain that would be great. So you said you work with the client, not the diagnosis, not the issue. Do you have the same kinds of metaphors and same strategies each time that you work with a client, or do you go completely into their world of thought, into their imagination?
I would say, because I'm not necessarily using a specific method, like, okay, this is what I use for trauma, this is what I use for anxiety, this is what I use for depression. It is always just a direct interaction or conversation with the subconscious, with the crew, if you like. I think I'm very much applying the same approach to everything that I work with. Now, it doesn't mean I don't listen to the client and hear what's going on with them, because I think that's important. I think the first step of making any changes is for allow that part to be heard. But that's why I set up some ideomotor responses. That's why I allow the subconscious to actually respond to what I'm saying, so that we're not feeling around in the dark, when we're not just applying something blindly. Oh, this is my method, this is what I use. Because even though I'm sitting here saying, I use the same approach with everyone, it's not like that approach doesn't adapt to every single human being that sits in front of me. I think part of that process is acknowledging that you can't help everyone. You're not going to be the right person for everyone as well. I see a lot of that. I was talking on Graham Wood's podcast the other day, and he asked me what would I like to see changed about, what would you like to get rid of in the hypnosis industry? And I said, well, I think the idea that everyone can benefit from hypnotherapy. It can help everyone. And don't get me wrong, everyone can benefit from relaxation, taking time out, seeing somebody, talking things through, but not everyone responds to hypnosis. It just, or they're not gonna, put it that way. We know we don't know whether everyone will or not, but we know that everyone we don't know everyone can or not, but we know not everyone will. And I think that should be given more airtime when people are training as well, is that if you didn't put them under, if that's the term we're using, that might not be anything down to you. That might just be because they're not the sort of person that is going to respond in the way that we like people to respond when we're doing any sort of hypnosis, whether it's eyes open, non-trance, whether it's deep hypnosis, whatever it is. Everyone has their own level of talent for these things, or lack of. So you got to adapt. You got to adapt to the person in front of you, I think.
Yeah, I know, but when we start out with hypnotherapy, learning about it, it's like, oh my God, everything can be solved with hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
No, we
Yeah.
can't. Not everything.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
there's some caveats to it. And to close an open loop here, ERT is a method from Tom Silver.
Oh, okay. I
I'm not
haven't.
familiar with it, but
Oh, there we go. We've got our homework.
yeah, we do. We do. Now we still have an open loop, but we kind of know what it is. Okay, another comment. Often when we go to a therapist, we effectively say, I want to give you permission to give me permission to believe in the things I can't give myself permission to believe in.
That makes sense. It
Wow,
just
it
about
does
made
make
sense. If it had
sense.
gone on, if that sentence had gone on any longer, I would not have been able to understand it. But it just about stopped in time for me there.
I ran out of breath there, but
I
that
think I
was just
think
because I
I
didn't
I
breathe in
agree with it.
beforehand,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
swish.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
well,
honestly,
the
I
thing
think
is,
I think that is it. That we make this mistake, I think, sometimes of thinking that our client starts here on their journey with us,
Mhm,
and then we want to get them here. When
mhm.
actually the client is like about here on their journey. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they've had to recognize the problem. They've done some research. They've looked
Mhm.
for a method. They've tried a load of other methods. They've realized there's hypnotherapy available. They've looked at other hypnotherapists, maybe tried other
Yeah.
hypnotherapists. They've found us eventually. They've
Mhm.
decided they're going to go and book in with us. And
Yeah.
now they're just, so that they've done a whole load of their journey.
Yeah.
If this were a film, we're only joining it in the very last bit of the last act, aren't we?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it is that they've had to commit so heavily to the process
Yeah.
to actually get in front of us and say, can I give you money to help me with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, not to be underestimated.
Well, this is actually a marketing thing, what we've just described, that timeline. Eugene Schwartz, breakthrough advertising,
Okay.
not knowing what their problem is to knowing what their problem is to going to finding a solution and then finding you at the end. It's
Hmm. Hmm.
same thing. Just I
Okay.
just thought I'd be smart and mention it. But
Yeah.
now let me quickly get into medication. What do you say? Because we wanted to be a bit more practical as well.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you say to anxiety clients who are on medication for anxiety?
I don't. The only thing I'm really going to say about medication when it comes to clients is that I'm not a doctor.
Hmm.
Do you know, I mean, that might sound really reductive, but because
Yeah.
they talk to me, sometimes they'll say, so, should I be coming off my medication while we're doing this?
Hmm.
I'm like, well, I can't advise you on medication because I'm not a
Yeah.
doctor. It would be unethical of me to even venture my opinion on that. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the only thing I'll say to clients is that if you want to come off medication, then your job is to go to the person that put you on that medication
Hmm.
or somebody,
Yeah.
with like-minded qualifications, so to speak, express your wishes
Yeah.
because they will then be able to advise you of the safest way to do that so
Hmm.
that it doesn't interfere too much with your day-to-day running of things, but I don't necessarily tailor any support or any techniques based on whether you're on meds or not. I
Hmm.
never have. It's one of those things where a bit of me thinks, oh, should I pay more attention to it? But until it becomes a problem, I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it hasn't ever become a problem. The closest I've had is I remember a client that went on medication at the same time as he started seeing me as a practitioner.
Right.
And I think it was antidepressant stuff. And look, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I know that takes weeks and weeks and weeks to kick in before you're meant to see the effects of it. And he said, after our first session, I think the second session we did following up on how we'd done, he'd seen a huge change. And he
Mm.
said, yeah, I think the meds have really helped,
Yeah.
and there's
That
there's a
sucks,
bit of
doesn't it?
me that's like, God damn it. But at the same time, if I ever hear that from a client, my job isn't to say, no, that was me. I
Yeah.
definitely did that. And my job is to say, look, at what point do you think you'll start to credit yourself with your changes
Hmm.
rather than the medication?
Yeah.
Just to ask that question, what would it take maybe for you to
Mm.
credit yourself with these positive changes rather than whatever meds you're now on?
Do you find that a lot of clients have the same sorts of personalities? I mean, anxious personality, yes, but you said you were talking about crediting yourself. That tells me that there might be low self-esteem or whatever involved.
Yeah.
What kind of traits do anxious clients have?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. Low self-esteem, the idea we're not good enough. That
Of course.
tends to
Okay.
be the ubiquitous, response of people, is that there's in some way they don't feel able to cope
Hmm.
with life's challenges or with their own responses. They've
Hmm.
lost a bit of faith in themselves.
Yeah.
So I think inevitably when you're working with anxiety, our job is totally to get the client to the point where they realize they're good enough and they can handle life's challenges.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the reason why the second fear that we're talking about is so impactful is because you might be thinking, yeah, I'm great, and I handle life, I go to work, I'm really good at work, I handle crises really well. That's before I had this anxiety disorder, though.
Hmm.
Now I've
Yeah.
got this anxiety disorder.
Hmm.
I'm not so good. I can't do half the things I used to do. I'm struggling with the simplest of tasks. And of course, that's why they're beating themselves up so much, because they used to do
Yeah.
these things easily and now they're struggling. Yeah.
Right.
So it feeds into that rhetoric that
Hmm.
for whatever reason, I'm a diminished version of myself.
Hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, so you very often, but sometimes that's simply about recognizing that you haven't got to do any work on how good you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because as soon as you stop beating yourself up, as soon as you stop tearing yourself down and saying that these responses mean I'm not good enough, or I'm rubbish, or I've lost, something of me, then all of that self-esteem will be restored, and
Yeah.
you'll recognize yourself as the person you are.
Mm.
It's like I said, it's not about fixing every little cog in the machine. It's about
Yeah.
taking the spanner out that's currently stopping it from just functioning perfectly well. And oftentimes that spanner is this idea that there's something wrong with me.
Hmm.
I have anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Okay.
remember I put up a video a couple of years ago, and the title was "You Don't Have Anxiety." Yeah, and God Almighty, it did really well, but only because all the CBT practitioners were straight in the comments about it. Do you
Force
know what I
feeding it.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
it was like they did spectacularly well at missing the point. To be fair,
Hmm.
So, but,
Okay, so we talked about yeah, kind of characteristics, that psychological characteristics that anxious people have.
mm.
Do you find that they have any physical characteristics, any, symptoms, illnesses, or whatever, where you would say, oh yeah, this is somebody who's anxious, or that's
Yeah,
I
okay.
that's
The
the
only
problem.
thing I would say there, physical characteristics, is that you'll often hear them talk about a sensitized nervous system, because
Hmm.
that's what they've read about, is their nervous
Yeah.
system sensitized. But in terms of physical responses, they will probably be struggling with sleep.
Hmm.
And as a result, the cortisol awakening response will be
Hmm.
exaggerated. So
Yeah.
when they wake up in the morning, they will feel cortisol in
Really.
their system viscerally. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it will hit a little bit harder for them. And
Hmm.
again, that will exacerbate the problem, because they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not even thinking about anything. It just strikes for no reason. It's my sensitized nervous system. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, you've just got crew members that are acting as sentries, looking
Yeah.
out for any slight physical disturbances,
Hmm.
because that is perceived to be the big bad.
Hmm.
Yeah. And what they need to know is that it isn't. There's
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with experiencing, a little bit of a jolt in the morning when your body needs a jolt to get going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, oh, we have more questions. How do they usually know when to stop the meds after successful sessions, especially as the doctor probably won't believe that the hypnosis did something towards the patient getting better? And do they
Okay.
often have a setback without the chemical substance?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's a really good topic to raise. Okay, so first off, I don't necessarily always frame what I do as hypnosis. I
Hmm.
talk about being a control practitioner. I talk about being a mind coach on my YouTube channel. Everyone
Hmm.
finds me via my YouTube channel. Some of them don't even know that my job title is hypnotist or hypnotherapist.
Right.
So, and because I don't work with any trance, sometimes they don't need to know. There's nothing
Hmm.
about that they need to be important, because many people, I'm sure there's people in the room, you'd look at what I'm doing and say, yeah, but Tim, that's not hypnosis.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm all right with that, if that's what you think. But there'll be other people that say, Tim, what you do is absolutely hypnosis. Okay, I'm all right with that as well. It doesn't matter. You know, it's like, I'm happy for you to say it isn't. I'm happy for you to say it is. Okay. So hopefully there's not them going to their doctor and saying, well, I saw this hypnotist and I feel great now. Yeah. But I would hope that when they feel comfortable to come off of meds, and hopefully they do it in a responsible way. Bottom line here, most of them just do it. They don't go to their doctor, which I'm not advocating for at all. I think you should. I think, you know, if you've entered into this agreement, this process with your doctor, stick with it. If you enter into a process with anyone, even if you want to end that process, do it formally. You know, explain that you're exiting it, and if that's what you're doing with your doctor, then do that. But most people just reduce the meds and just carry on. You know, but if you're going to talk to your doctor about it, then hopefully they're doing it in a way, or I would certainly advise them to do it in the way that I expressed earlier. You know, I want to come off these meds. I'm feeling like I'm ready to. What's the safest way to do that? Can you advise me of a program to do that? If you say that to your doctor, you get a very different response than if you say, I want to come off these meds because I feel great now. I've been to see a hypnotist and I'm fixed. Yeah, because one sounds, I mean, you know, I can see a couple of people like having a giggle at that. Yeah, but that's the point. One sounds like, you know, okay, you've thought this through. This would be great for you, because hopefully the doctor doesn't want to just keep you on meds. Because hopefully the doctor realizes meds are not meant to be a long-term solution to depression and anxiety. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I think these days they mostly do. Hopefully. But they should want to help you come off them. Yeah. But if you just go in there and say, right, saw the hypnotist, sorted, mate. Can we just come off these meds now then? You know, then they're probably not going to take you seriously because you don't sound like a serious person. Right. To quote Succession.
Yeah, if you come in like very like, can I come off the meds? They might mistake that for anxiety, right?
They, I suppose, what a timidity. They may think
because that's what you said. The self-esteem, lack of self-esteem that might express potentially. But let's get to the control system, because there's a question. So is the control system done in trance or differently?
It's done outside of trance, I would suggest, but it depends on your definition of trance. Okay. It's not done as a formal hypnotic trance. That's probably the best way of putting it, in the sense there's no eyes closed induction into hypnosis, deeper and deeper, that kind of thing. It's done eyes open, wide awake. You are as conscious as we all are, hopefully, just about on this podcast now. Yeah. So I like it to be a collaborative effort. And I like the client to realize that I didn't do anything to them. You know, we've got a problem with hypnotherapy in the sense that every therapist knows the aim is for the client to realize they're okay. They made the changes. It wasn't us that did it. It was them that did it. That's the point of it, right? No matter what therapy you're doing. And then at some point we say, right, lay on the couch, close your eyes, off you go to sleep. When you wake up, everything will be fixed. Yeah. And that's the opposite of empowerment. Yeah. That's a more positive disempowerment, but it's still disempowerment. So I like to work with them wide awake, so that when they get their changes, they don't just get them because I went to that guy that fixed me. They get their changes because, like, you know what? I understand what's going on now so much better than I used to. You know, you get this. I always think there's 3 stages to our journey here. We start in a place of ignorance. Yeah, we're fine because we simply haven't realized bad shit can happen. Yeah, and then bad stuff happens. And we go to a place of it. Am I right? I didn't.
You're all right. That's cool.
Okay, it's not a bad swear word. We go to the place of experience where we're highly anxious now because something happened, and now we've realized, oh my god, I can have this like a panic attack or something like that. That I didn't. That feels like I'm not in control of me. I didn't realize that could happen. And then you're locked in, and everyone says, I want to go back to here, how I felt before the anxiety. But you can't go from experience to ignorance. It doesn't work that way. Right. Because you can't simply stop knowing what you now know. Our job is to move them to the next place, understanding. Now, understanding will feel almost exactly like ignorance because you're fine. Yeah. Anytime you feel anxious, you don't think about feeling anxious because it's just your crew flagging up, oh, pay attention to that. You don't pay attention to the fact that you're anxious about something. which is like you were in ignorance. But you are no longer, when you're in understanding, you're no longer vulnerable to moving into experience again, because you've gone through it. Now you understand anxiety. Now you understand what it's all about. Now you understand that there's nothing to fear. And now you're no longer vulnerable to go into a place where you feel like you're out of control of you.
Right. So would you call that in any way conversational hypnosis? Do you use any language patterns, anything like that?
No language patterns. No, I'm not a fan of language patterns because I was rubbish at them. I was always, I never really got my head around them, if I'm honest. And I can't be doing with thinking about how I'm phrasing everything. I'm sure I do phrase certain things, as we would say, hypnotically, if you know what I mean. I'm sure I do phrase certain things. And I try not to say really stupid things. I try not to say really stupid things, honestly.
You try. Oh God.
I try, but I'm not always successful. But I think, but I'm not doing actual language patterns because I don't believe in them. I don't believe they are the key that unlocks anything. I think if I can communicate clearly, then your mind understands what I'm saying. If it answers the objections that your mind currently has to get into this place that we want to get to, I don't need language patterns. Language patterns would just be gumph or window dressing, or even just things that confuse the issue. There's nothing worse than a hypnotist that speaks only in language patterns. And you're like, what are you saying? I don't understand what you mean. Why are you talking weird? And I can't be doing. The weirdest thing I do with clients is get their fingers moving without them moving them. That's it. But if I can't, I draw the line at language patterns and talking like a weirdo. I can't do it.
You're allowed to talk not like a weirdo. But how do you know that clients have changed? Do they tell you, or do you have a specific amount of sessions that you do no matter what? I don't think so, but you might.
I actually do a 3-session protocol, Astrid.
Sorry, you do a 3-session protocol.
But,
how do you know
but it's always flexible, of course. It's like you do what you need to do. But I'm not a fan of one and done. Because I don't believe in following up via email or phone conversation, because people lie and or they don't give you the full truth. We follow up face to face in a session. That's why I do a 3-session protocol, because I used to do 2. I used to let's get it done in 1. Let's do a second session, follow up, consolidate the work, check everything is there. Experience tells me 3 tends to lift the pressure off the person as an individual in terms of, okay, you're treating this with the respect it deserves. You're not just saying, oh, I'll fix you in 1 session and off you go, live your life. Because I think this is the problem. It's quite easy to get the client at the end of session 1 saying, yeah, that feels a lot better. I can't access that negative feeling or emotion or things like that. I'm thinking, that I think we've got the result. But the hard thing is then to get them come back a week or 2 weeks later and confirm that everything they'd hoped for has happened. It's exactly, and that's what we want to do. We don't want, it's not done at the end of session 1. It can never be done at the end of session 1. Even if we've been able to bring in the thing they had a phobia of or something like that and put it in front of them, and in the session they're fine with it, still doesn't mean tomorrow when they go into the situation where they normally would encounter that thing they're afraid of, they're not going to have the same reaction. I've got 2 tarantulas in this room, right? Don't ask. It's a weird story. Don't ask me, right?
Oh, good. No.
And people were like, oh, do you use that with clients then for a fear of spiders? First of all, can you imagine if I said, I've got tarantulas in here, so at the end of the session, we'll get them out, shall we? And you can have they wouldn't come to see me. I'd never see any clients with fear of spiders. But also me saying, oh, look, you can hold this tarantula now, still doesn't mean you won't shit yourself the next time a spider runs out of the skirting board in your home. Because it's a different framework of environment. So it's like, go and live your life, come back, tell me how you've done. And if we've got to tidy up some loose ends, let's tidy them up. Because the way I work, all we're doing is continuing the conversation with that crew member, with that bit of your subconscious, and we'll get there, we'll get tidied up, whatever needs tidying up, But don't get me wrong, I don't limit the amount of sessions. I just have a standard, let's start with this program. Most of the time, that's all we need. Absolutely. But we're not afraid to go further if we need to. We're not going to just say, well, sorry, you've had your sessions. It should be sorted by now. Clearly you don't want to change, do you? You know, something like that, which is
Sorry,
just,
that's oh, that's bad, isn't it?
but you hear that so
You
often.
do, you
The
do.
number of times clients have come to me and said, you're not going to tell me that I don't want to change, are you? Because that's what the last guy said. And it's like, oh man.
Oh,
You know?
yeah, sorry, but oh,
Yeah,
I don't
way,
like
way to
that.
blame the client, dude.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
great. That's great for self-esteem and self-confidence and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
And the anxiety.
Yeah.
I was going to ask. So the third session, that's again for clearing up loose ends, or
Yeah, and a bit of
yeah,
consolidation work, things like that.
more consolidation. Okay. So
Yeah.
what's the longest you've ever worked with a client?
Wow, that's a request for
We
honesty,
want to
isn't it?
know.
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
is.
Longest I've ever worked with a client, um, in all honesty, probably more sessions than I've counted.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there are certain clients at times, um, it stops being just about the one thing that you've come to work on, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yeah.
And I know that we're not in the game of cultivating dependency. Don't get me wrong, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But there's also sometimes the service that people want from us extends beyond a simple, can you change this pattern of thought? And I used to be very uncomfortable with people that wanted that, you know, as in, well, I can't really do that sort of work. I can't be that person that you check in with every month. You know, there's other people that could do that for you. But
Yeah.
experience has taught me, oh, you're much better off talking to me than going and getting a counselor right now, you know,
Yeah.
to dredge up everything, you know, and tell you that you've still got a problem, you've still got stuff to work through.
Right.
So it's one of those things where I am comfortable now stepping outside of my standard protocol to cater for the client that says, hey, can we check in? I'll let you know when I don't want to check in anymore. You know, that kind of thing. I always remember one of my old trainers saying that, you know, people seem comfortable with the idea that people might go and get a massage once a month, but they're not comfortable with the idea that somebody has ongoing sessions with a therapist. And I get that. I see why one shouldn't be allowed rather than the other one not allowed or something like that, you know. So but yeah, probably it would just be a number that I wouldn't necessarily be able to give you the exact number.
Right. Well, I know some therapists now that you're saying they like it's going for a haircut or something else. I do know some colleagues who work with clients like that. They just come for a cleanup of their mind or whatever. Just maintenance work.
Yeah.
Do you get that as well sometimes?
Yeah, I think as long as we're not framing it as a top up. Yeah, because I think we don't do our clients any favors if we say, oh yeah, you just want to, you know, top this up every month just to keep it all nice and fresh. You know, it's like an extra your injection of the medicine for the month. You know, I don't agree with that, because then again, you're cultivating dependency. You need to keep topping it up, or this will revert back to the old pattern. No, once we know the better strategy for our happiness, why would our mind go back to the worst strategy for happiness? But yeah, I'm comfortable with the idea that people want ongoing mind coaching.
Yeah.
Times, you know, it tends to be Americans, by the way. I don't know if Americans watching this will be able to relate to that.
They might.
But it seems to be more of an American concept than a British one, or should I say a European one. But and apologies if I'm generalizing there, but in my experience, my American clients are more likely to say something like at the end of the sessions, do you offer like regular, you know, sessions, like your standard therapist might? And I used to say no, and now I'm like, well, why am I saying no? Why am I disqualifying that from them if that's what they want, when I know probably I could keep helping them, and I'll do it as long as I feel I'm still helping them. If I feel like I'm just, you know, I remember one client way back in the day, and you know, it started to get to the point where it's like, we're just having a chat every month, aren't we? You know what I mean? I think we're just talking about what's on the news or what we're watching on telly. And I pointed out to them, I said, you know what, our conversations are vastly different these days. You know, we don't talk about your anxiety struggles or things that you're concerned about or things in your life that have pissed you off that you need to talk through. We're just having a nice friendly chat and check in, aren't we? And they were like, yeah, I think we probably are. And that was when we were like, okay, maybe we'll stop the sessions then. We don't really need this, do we? But yeah, as long as we're mindful of that sort of thing, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, I think. You know.
That sounds really good. So, now before we end this session, because we're over an hour now, and it's
Blimey, we
been
are.
lovely
Yeah.
chatting. Yeah, we are.
Have we not?
You have a course of the control system or a workshop on the 28th to the 31st of May, and then again on the 11th to the 14th of June.
That's right.
So
The training comes in two parts. So if
where,
anyone that's watching this is interested in maybe learning how I work and becoming the 152nd control practitioner, I know
ooh,
the exact number at the moment because I just qualified the 151st the other day.
right.
Then yeah, that's the training, and I will I will be offering to people who are watching this. If
Hmm.
you mention Astrid and you mention this podcast,
Mind
you will get a
explorations. Yeah.
40% discount on the
No.
training price. So
Oh,
but you
if
have
you
to
want
mention it. You can't. Linda's but woohoo.
to. What's the price? What's the
That was
price?
the effect I was hoping for. Was the woohoo? Yeah, yeah. But yeah. So
But
yeah.
you'll tell us the price in the group, or will tell me secretly because I'm curious now. I think
Um, yeah. I will. Yeah, I'll put it. Do I put it? I don't even. I. Yeah, yeah. I'll put it.
you
We'll
don't
put
need
it.
to say it on screen because YouTube is forever. But
That's
in the
true,
group,
isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it
Good
is. So if you ever want to raise the price, you can't. So, but
point.
yeah, I'm happy to have it on the inside the Mind Explorations group for anyone who wants to join.
Cool, cool.
And yeah, it was lovely to talk to you.
Lovely
And
to talk to you, Astrid.
I
Thank you.
hope everybody's learned something about anxiety not being a disorder. It's not a disorder, it's just an emotion. And if you're a client, if you would like to go see somebody to help with your emotion of anxiety, go see Tim or go see one of his current and future practitioners of the control system, I would
Thank
say.
you very much.
Anyway, thank you everybody for joining live. Thank you everybody for watching on the replay. If you would press the like button, that would be amazing. If you want to leave a comment, that's amazing. We love a discount. Of course we do. We always do. And thank you so much, Tim, for being here. It was amazing chatting to you about everything before the show and in the show. And
Thank you for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. And good luck with the course and everything. And we'll see everything inside the Mind Explorations Facebook group. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. Have a good night. Bye.